Welcome to the debate. I want to start by having you just imagine for a second that you are born into a game of Monopoly.
Okay.
But it's a game that has already been playing for like 500 years.
Wow. Okay. So late to the party.
Very late. By the time you actually sit down at the table, all the property is completely bought up.
Right.
The rents are astronomical. And you are handed, I don't know, a measly $2 to try and survive.
Which won't get you very far on boardwalk.
Exactly. It won't. So the question is, do you play ruthlessly because you are just naturally a greedy, competitive person?
Yeah.
Or do you play ruthlessly because the actual design of the board gives you absolutely no other choice?
I mean, it's a compelling image for sure. But the counter question, the one we really have to ask is, well, who designed the board in the first place?
Right. The architects of the game.
Exactly. Because if every time human beings sit down to play a game, they invent Monopoly, we have to wonder if the rules of the game are just a reflection of the players themselves.
And that tension, that exact tension is what we are tearing into today.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at this thought experiment. It's often referred to as the twin world concept.
Right, the twin world.
Yeah, which challenges us to imagine this an infallible society.
An infallible society, which is quite a term.
It is. And the central question we're really grappling with here is, are human behaviors, things like extreme greed or the obsession with status and that just constant gnawing fear of scarcity, are those inevitable biological traits that are just wired into our species?
Right, are they baked in?
Baked in, yeah. Or are they being continuously produced and reinforced and amplified by the specific incentives of our modern money-based economic system?
So essentially, it's a question of architecture versus the materials.
Yes, perfectly put.
Do the flaws lie in the blueprint of the society, or do they lie in the fundamental nature of the bricks, meaning the human beings themselves?
That's it exactly. And I'm taking the position that the environment, specifically our pervasive economic system, it acts as a massive, almost invisible organizing principle.
Okay.
It actively shapes human priorities from the literal moment we are born.
From day one.
Day one. So my argument is that a fundamental shift in those systemic incentives could radically alter what we currently, and mistakenly, I think, assume is fixed human nature.
And my perspective on this is that while environmental incentives absolutely matter, they certainly influence how our behaviors manifest.
Sure.
Our foundational biology remains a fixed baseline.
The baseline doesn't move.
Right, it doesn't move. We have an inherent capacity for jealousy, a drive for self-preservation, and this really deep-seated desire for social recognition.
Okay.
And those traits, they will inevitably dictate human behavior regardless of whatever economic structure we try to impose from the top down.
Well, let's start by looking at what we actually mean by freedom and choice. Because I would argue that much of what we call human nature is actually just deep, unwritten childhood conditioning.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, we like to imagine that as we grow up, we, take out a pen and deliberately write our own rules for what to value.
Like we're blank slates, making rational choices.
Exactly. But the ink is already dry on those pages long before our critical thinking faculties ever even develop.
Sure, we absorb things.
Think about it. A 5-year-old child doesn't sit down, evaluate a spectrum of economic systems and say, yes, I think I'll participate in global capitalism.
No, obviously not.
They don't care about stock portfolios.
Right.
They simply observe the adults around them.
They absorb the mechanics of how to survive in their environment.
Exactly. They watch adults stressing over bills at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
They see adults comparing cars, comparing houses, salaries.
The hushed conversations about money.
Yes, the hushed, panicked conversations. They watch their parents panic over healthcare costs. And this absorption, it's a profound education.
It sets the baseline.
It teaches the child not just arbitrary facts, but what is normal, and more importantly, what is worth fearing.
Okay.
The child learns very, very early on that survival is inextricably tied to money.
Because it is in this system.
Right, housing, healthcare, food, the absolute baseline necessities for continuing to breathe are locked behind a paywall.
That is a stark way to put it, but yeah.
And when you make survival contingent on accumulation in a highly competitive system, you inherently breed extreme economic insecurity.
You're saying it forces protective behavior.
Yes, the system is manufacturing the greed, not our biology.
I come at it from a different way.
Okay, tell me.
I have to ask, are children actually being shaped by an artificial, arbitrary narrative? Or are they simply observing universal human hierarchies that just happen to use money as their current medium of exchange?
But money is the specific stressor here.
You're speaking of status and wealth accumulation as if they are uniquely tied to our modern economic environment. But anyone who has ever watched two toddlers interact in a playroom knows that you don't need a mortgage to understand resource guarding.
Well, toddlers snatching toys is a bit different than...
One toddler has a toy, right?
Right.
The other toddler wants the toy.
Sure, but...
If we observe human behavior across history, and indeed, if we look at evolutionary biology and primate behavior, hierarchy is a constant. It's a universal.
I don't disagree that toddlers snatch toys, but I think extrapolating that to global economic warfare is a massive stretch.
But the mechanism is the exact same. It's just the medium that changes.
How so?
Look, 10,000 years ago, the medium of status was physical strength, or, hunting prowess.
Okay.
In feudal times, it was land ownership. Today, it's fiat currency.
So you think money is just the latest version?
Yes, the biological drive to elevate oneself above others, to secure a better chance at reproduction and survival, it is baked into our neurochemistry.
Right.
When we achieve status, our brain literally rewards us with serotonin and dopamine. Money is just the current uniform that human nature happens to be wearing.
But see, attributing competition primarily to the economic environment. Wait, you're saying I'm ignoring that humans built this?
Yes. Attributing it to the environment fundamentally ignores the rather glaring fact that human beings created this environment in the first place.
We did.
We didn't just arrive on a planet with a pre-existing banking system. We built it. It came from us.
I am not convinced by that line of reasoning, honestly.
Why not?
Because it assumes that whenever humans created in the past was the only inevitable outcome of our biology, rather than just one iteration based on early environmental pressures.
Well, early pressures were significant.
Yes, early humans faced brutal physical scarcity. The winter was coming, the crops might fail.
Right.
But let's look at the psychological cascade that is specifically triggered by a money-based society today.
Okay.
If you're listening to this on your commute to a job you don't particularly like.
Which is a lot of people.
Right, a lot of people. And you're just doing it so you can pay off a mortgage or afford groceries. You are living the exact psychological cascade we are talking about.
The stress of maintaining the baseline.
Yes, you need food. Food costs money, so you need a job.
Right.
You compete for that job. You constantly worry about losing it. You worry about debt. And eventually, you begin measuring an enormous portion of your entire existence through a single pervasive question.
Can I afford it?
Exactly. Can I afford it?
Which is a very stressful state to live in. Absolutely. I'm not denying that.
It's more than just stressful, though. It completely rewires human motivation.
Rewires it how?
That isn't just a natural primate hierarchy playing out in a boardroom. That is a state of chronic panic, manufactured by a world that puts a literal price tag on your right to exist.
Okay, but...
Intelligent adults spend decades of their lives aggressively defending assumptions they never consciously chose.
Because the system demands compliance.
Because the pressure of the system demands it. We assume this is human nature, but if society teaches children what reality is supposed to be, then our current reality is just a highly successful, generationally transmitted narrative.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that scarcity itself is a physical and biological fact of the universe, not merely a systemic invention?
A fact of the universe?
Yes. The anxiety you are describing, that modern "can I afford it" cascade,
Yeah.
that is simply the translation of "will I survive the winter?" or "is there enough food in the territory for my family?"
But it's not the same thing anymore.
You are pointing to the anxiety produced by money, but money is merely a proxy. It's a proxy for resource allocation in a world where resources are objectively finite.
But in modern society, we actually do have enough resources.
Do we?
Yes, we produce enough food to feed the entire globe, yet millions starve.
Because of distribution issues.
Because they lack the proxy. They lack the money to access it. The scarcity is artificial.
True, the distribution is wildly uneven, I will give you that. But the biological imperative to hoard against potential future scarcity, that doesn't just turn off because a grocery store exists down the street.
You think we're just permanently stuck in hunter-gatherer mode?
Our brains evolved in environments where caloric scarcity was a constant daily threat.
Right.
If you completely remove wealth as the metric tomorrow, humans won't suddenly stop feeling anxiety about survival or status.
You don't think so?
Not at all. They will simply pivot. They will aggressively compete for other forms of status or control over whatever new system is put in place.
So you're saying the jealousy and competition.
The jealousy, the competition, the protective, ruthless nature. These will exist over any scarce resource, whether that resource is capital, social standing, political influence, or mates.
And this is exactly where the source material's twin world thought experiment becomes absolutely vital to our discourse today.
Okay, let's get into the twin world.
Because it challenges that exact assumption you just made. Let's look at the actual mechanics of these two hypothetical worlds.
Right.
So they share the same planet, the same human biology, the same evolutionary history that you're talking about.
The same raw materials.
The same bricks. Now, in World 1, which is our world, people grow up believing success means accumulating wealth and fiercely protecting personal financial security.
The monopoly board.
Exactly, the monopoly board. Now, look at World 2, the Infallible society.
Right.
This society is organized around fundamentally different assumptions. Baseline necessities are guaranteed.
Okay, guaranteed.
Yes. Simply existing grants you the right to food, shelter, and healthcare.
A total removal of the survival panic.
Completely removed. And education isn't just an assembly line to produce compliant workers for corporate employment.
It's not just about job training.
No, it's treated as a holistic human development process. And work itself, it's organized around meaningful contribution rather than mere profit generation.
Sounds very utopian.
Well, the material argues that if we dramatically reduce that baseline economic insecurity, if survival is truly no longer in question, the pressure to be utterly ruthless weakens significantly.
Weakens, but does it disappear?
It doesn't disappear overnight, of course not. But the incentive structure is inverted. You no longer have to crush your neighbor to ensure your kids have health care.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
The fatal flaw in the twin world experiment is the environment-institution feedback loop.
The feedback loop.
Yes. Which, honestly, the text we are discussing even acknowledges in passing.
It does, yeah.
Think about the mechanics of building World 2. Environment shapes people, right?
Right.
People create environments, those environments shape people, and the cycle just continues.
Okay, I follow.
If people are the ones who must create this new environment, and people are fundamentally flawed, jealous, and selfish,
Which is your premise.
which is a biological reality, how on earth can they engineer an infallible society that doesn't just immediately recreate the exact same biological power struggles under a new name?
You think the architects would inherently corrupt the new design?
Absolutely. You cannot use flawed instruments to build a flawless system. The ambition of World 2 assumes that we can somehow step outside of our evolutionary neurochemistry long enough to design a system that suppresses it.
To pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, biologically speaking.
Exactly. But the architects of World 2 are still World 1 humans.
Right.
Even in a radically different environment, humans will still experience anger. They will still make mistakes.
Sure.
They will still act on selfish impulses, and they will still fiercely desire recognition. Changing the rules of society does not magically turn humans into saints.
Because the rules are executed by primates. Primates who still want to be at the top of the troop. Yes, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Okay.
Let's step away from the abstract for a second. Think of the economic environment like a literal pressure cooker on a stove.
A pressure cooker. Okay.
The biological ingredients inside the pot, our human emotions, our capacity for jealousy, our drive for recognition.
The raw materials.
Yes, they remain exactly the same. We aren't changing the ingredients, but our current money-based system is turning the heat up to an absolute maximum.
It's boiling.
It is artificially sealing the lid and generating an immense crushing pressure in the form of economic insecurity.
Okay, I'm following the metaphor.
Under that specific, intense pressure,
The ingredients react violently. The water boils, the pressure builds.
And that's the ruthlessness we see.
Exactly. We see ruthless competition, we see hoarding and greed. It looks chaotic and destructive.
Because the heat is so high.
Because the heat is on maximum. But if you release that artificial systemic pressure,
If you turn down the dial.
if you turn down the heat by guaranteeing basic necessities and removing the very real threat of starvation and homelessness, the resulting behavior of those exact same ingredients is entirely different.
The water simmers instead of boiling.
Yes, the water simmers. We aren't magically fixing the humans. We aren't changing the ingredients or trying to play God with biology.
Right.
We are simply observing what happens when we stop boiling people alive.
I have to admit the pressure cooker analogy is striking. It really is.
It clarifies things, I think.
It perfectly highlights the precise divergence in our views on this material.
How so?
Well, I will absolutely concede that turning down the heat, meaning reducing extreme poverty and systemic economic anxiety, will change the intensity of certain behaviors.
Okay.
If people aren't terrified of starving in the streets, sure, the survival panic subsides a bit. I'll give you that.
It's a crucial distinction, though, isn't it?
It is.
Changing the intensity changes the lived reality of millions of people.
It does. It certainly does. And I will also concede that testing this hypothesis scientifically, like approaching societal design with curiosity,
Right, treating it like a science.
observing what happens when we tweak the dials, rather than assuming the current system is the only possible system, that is an intellectually rigorous pursuit.
It's much better than the alternative.
It's far better than just throwing our hands up and saying, well, humans are awful, so let's just keep the Monopoly game going.
Right, exactly. However,
Here comes the but. I maintain that the baseline of human selfishness will always find a way to express itself, regardless of the temperature in the pot.
you think it'll just manifest somewhere else.
The water might just be simmering, but it is still hot.
Okay.
Even if you guarantee food and shelter, humans will find a new resource to hoard. Let's look at academic institutions,
Oh, sure.
or Wikipedia editors even.
Right.
These are spaces where money isn't the primary driver at all. And yet the political backstabbing and turf wars in those environments are legendary.
They fight over commas.
Exactly. Why? Because if the scarce resource isn't money, it becomes influence.
Or recognition.
If it isn't influence, it will be access to the most desirable social roles or recognition for intelligence. The environment can shift how our flaws are expressed, but it cannot eradicate the underlying evolutionary impulses.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently.
How would you frame it?
Isn't shifting how those flaws are expressed exactly the entire point of human progress?
Well, progress is a strong word, but go on.
Think about it. If human selfishness shifts from, hoarding life-saving medicine to artificially inflate prices so people literally die,
Right.
if it shifts from that to trying to paint a better mural than your neighbor so you get more social recognition,
Okay, yeah.
that is a monumental leap in the quality of civilization.
It's a less lethal form of competition, I'll grant you that.
It's a completely different paradigm. The argument isn't that we must create perfect humans.
Which is impossible anyway.
Exactly. If you believe every social problem is caused by inherently defective human beings, your only solution is the impossible task of trying to fix the humans themselves.
Through moralizing or punishment.
Through moralizing or punishment, which never works. But if you recognize that certain destructive behaviors are being continuously produced, or, to use my analogy, boiled to the surface, by the environment,
The pressure cooker.
then redesigning the surrounding conditions becomes the most pragmatic, scientific path forward.
You focus on the pot, not the water.
Right. The most powerful education a human receives is from their environment.
Okay.
If we deliberately redesign those conditions to guarantee basic necessities, we might discover that human nature is vastly more adaptable than we ever dared to assume.
It is a beautiful vision. Truly it is. But it is one that must remain anchored in biological reality.
We can't ignore biology, I agree.
I think we actually agree on the core premise of how we should move forward here.
Testing new incentives?
Yes, testing new incentives, observing, measuring, and correcting. That scientific approach to societal structure is profound.
It really is.
But we have to go into that experiment with our eyes wide open to the constraints of the materials we are working with.
The flawed bricks.
The flawed bricks. Changing the environment can absolutely change the possibilities of what humanity might achieve.
Yes.
A new environment might mitigate the worst, most lethal outcomes of our biology, as you pointed out.
Right, shifting the competition.
But the impulses of jealousy, the desire for recognition, and the drive for personal advantage, those will always require management.
You don't think they'll ever fade?
They are features of the human animal. They are not just bugs in the economic software that we can patch with a new update.
And perhaps that is where our perspectives find their most significant point of convergence today.
I think so.
Because we both recognize the profound insight offered by this material, the idea that addressing societal issues should be treated fundamentally as a scientific question.
Not a moral failing.
Right. We shouldn't be blindly trying to fix defective humans through guilt.
Which is exhausting and ineffective.
Exactly. Nor should we assume that human nature is perfectly utopian and entirely malleable.
Which is naive.
Right. Instead, we should be asking the hard questions, observing the data, measuring the outcomes, and correcting the systems.
Precisely. If a system doesn't work, if it's producing mass misery, we change the system.
We change the rules of the board.
Right. If a new system does work, we study why. It shifts the burden from expecting individuals to be morally perfect in a corrupt system to designing more intelligent systems that account for human realities.
Which, honestly, leaves us with a massive, hanging question at the end of all this.
The practical application.
Yes. Imagining a twin world or an infallible society is an incredible intellectual exercise.
It's a great thought experiment, but how does an idea actually move from imagination into reality?
That is the hard part. How do we begin to practically apply these theories and shift the incentives of a deeply entrenched global system without it just entirely collapsing into chaos?
Building even a small piece of that alternative world, actually testing it in reality with real, flawed human beings.
Right.
That is where the true test of these theories will begin. Until then, it's just blueprints.
It's just blueprints. And it brings us right back to where we started.
How so?
Well, if our reality, our values, and our fears are largely an instruction manual written by the environment we inherit.
The Monopoly game.
Right. Then perhaps the most revolutionary act a generation can undertake is to finally pick up the pen and try to write a new manual for the next.
Or, at the very least, dare to question the one we've been handed.
A perfect place to leave it for today.